Hi, I'm Bree, Master of Wine, and today we chatted about sustaining and diversifying the wine industry and how to make the wine industry more welcoming, welcome more women, and hopefully expand awareness of how interesting and how welcoming and how many different roles there are in this industry, and how many different paths there are to success. For me, it was, I was really interested in the Master of Wine from just a learning perspective, the critical approach to understanding why a region grows a certain grape varieties, and, how those flavors and the style of wine is really represented in the glass. Is what a lot of the Master of Wine program is about. And so for me, I was my first encounter with the Master of Wine program, I was kind of a baby somm in a fine dining restaurant in, Vancouver, BC. And, I'd started the WSET certifications, and I was doing my sommelier diploma, and I just loved the learning. You were able to travel the world through a glass of wine, and that's for me what the beauty of wine is. And there's so many stories in the wine industry, and just really beautiful family stories and historical stories, of pioneers and people who have a dream, or have been born into this. And it just depends on what part of the world you're in as to what story is the wine in your glass telling. And so for me, that was really interesting. I was working in the restaurant floor, a server, but I was also doing acting, and so exploring character roles and things like that. And I kind of got to do that through the glass, and through meeting, some of these interesting people who had, for me, a life that was completely different to any life that I would have even imagined having growing up. I grew up in a subtropical climate, with a beach close by, and there was really no wine region to speak of, and wine wasn't on the table at my house every day. So yeah, it was just, the curiosity and the learning factor that came with all of these wines from around the world that I had access to suddenly being on a restaurant floor. And then learning that there were programs being developed that would teach you about, the foundational wines of the world. And so that's where I really started doing the education and getting into that area. I was fortunate that the restaurant that I was in had a really great wine director in Barbara Phillip, who was a great mentor for me. She was, just very engaging and just so enthusiastic about wine. And she sort of had an open table policy almost to, if you were a host or a server and she had a meeting with a winemaker or a distributor who was coming in and showing her wines, if there was time, she was very much like, come in and sit down at the table and taste the wines with us, so that you get the experience. And then she was very big on staff training as well, so that we could sell the wines that she selected on the list. And she would explain to us why this was a great representative wine, and why it would pair with the food that we were serving so well, and why this wine really deserved a place on the table. And just her enthusiasm for the product and for the storytelling of the product, the connection to the people in the place was really engaging, and it really got me excited about wine, which yeah, you don't get taught in school that wine is an option, as a career path. They're barely allowed to talk about alcohol or anything. So it's really not something that gets discussed. And it's a huge industry, and it's, quite a failing really on the education system for how many people, hospitality and the wine industry and tourism, employs and serves, that we're not allowed to, think of this or speak of this as a beverage earlier until, we're of drinking age. So yeah, so that was kind of my first foray into really good wine. I, my mom and I loved to travel together, and we would travel to, as a teenager, the drinking age in Australia is lower than it is in the US. And so, my mom and I would, fly to, from Brisbane to Melbourne for a weekend, and we would go to the Mornington Peninsula or go to the Yarra Valley and go to wine regions and, go to galleries and things like that. But it was just something new and different. And so that was, also quite formative as well. But that was all Australian wine. But I got to see, yeah, what was occurring in the vineyard and how to speak about wine and how to talk about it. And so there was always an interest there.